Howdy, friends. So here's part 2 of the message I wanted to relay to us earlier. Of course, I'm driving again. I'm in the dark. But I wanted to make this video about how the serpent lives in all of us. Oh, yes, it's the truth. I mean, there was no escaping the serpent. It's always been here. Even when you go back to the ancient Egyptians and you look at the pharaohs who had the cobra at the top of their headpiece, you know, they were all about the serpent. So the serpent represents wisdom, yeah, and the agility and the tenacity, the stamina, the way that a serpent would strategize, how it's going to attack its prey. Even like what it does, like even if we want to just refer to the snake itself, how it knows, how its natural body applies to everything. If it wants to eat something, what it naturally does to accommodate it, to make it happen. Or when it digests something larger than its own body, it will still break it down. So I think symbolically that's why the serpent is so significant. Throughout everything, we see the serpent in, Chinese mythology with the dragons, the sacred dragons. You see it in Asian culture. The dragon, it's a spirit animal. And I like people to understand that when I speak about the serpent, I really don't mean or intend it to be like, oh, it's a bad thing and he is evil, the serpent is Satan, wahaha. But I think the serpent actually was a former light bringer, Lucifer. I've read something where I was like, ooh, I think this validates what I was thinking already. Because I was just trying to put together the story in my own head, because that's what I do. I was like, what happened to Lucifer? He was just banished to earth. He was kicked out of heaven because, he was a bad angel. I don't think that's part of it. If I were to assume the story, and maybe it's not just me, maybe a divine source is speaking through me. But if you had something, let's say for example, we all have the Lucifer genetic. We do. Because the mindset is of a wise serpent who can accommodate his behavior and habitat. He can coexist. He can disguise himself. He can be a chameleon, or he can I've never seen a snake fail at any battle. Have you seen any videos where a snake was, except for the eagle, right? But back to topic. We all have a Lucifer gene, because we are all called light workers to begin with, right? So if we weren't created in an image of illumination and light, then we wouldn't know how to use this ability and gift and power to be our own co-creators and gods of this oneness, of this reality. It's just not for us to dominate and take over and to be idolatrized as a god, and I kind of sometimes I get a little judgmental, and I'm being honest about how the Catholic practice. I have a friend, and she's always like, the Blessed Mother. I'm like, well, what about Christ? There's only one ascended master. There's only one conscious that had inherited her body so that she can bear the light. She was a light bearer too, but she didn't birth Lucifer. But Mary was actually was created in the same divinity as Lucifer. She's also known as the morning star. She's also known as the fallen angel, believe it or not. There's texts that prove it. And because she wasn't perfect, she was also chosen to be an anointed one. That's what her whole name is about, a chosen one. So it makes you think, like, where does she come from? Who was she? And what's her correlation with Lucifer? Or was the story misconstrued and, they didn't want to give women that much power back in the day, so they just made up a lie, made up a story, and said Lucifer was a man. But then also, too, if you had a fallen angel inbred with the women of Earth, then obviously we're all tainted with, we have that in our bodies. So people are capable of doing wrong, and others are capable of bringing right over wrong. We're all part of the same. We're all in the same. And I think that's why we're all trapped and stuck here, and why we're dealing with the judgment that has already commenced itself since the origin of his existence. It is what it is. So here we are, all half-bred of a sabotaging spirit that thought, oh, I could take my ability and power and all my knowledge and wisdom and inherit my own world, and bred my own, specimen around this world, and I will control everybody. And then here comes this guy named Satan. Because they're not the same person. A lot of people misconstrue Satan, the devil, and Lucifer. They're not the same. They're not the same person. If you do Greek mythology, Lucifer kind of sort of matches the identity of Zeus, because the electricity, the lightning, the light in general, the epicenter is the main evidence. That's what I'm working on with my project. And then if you have Hades, Helio, the sun, you have Ra, you have Satan. They're all within fire. So they're kind of the same. Then you have Kronos and Saturn and the Serpent. So that's all mindfulness and strategy and infiltration. Because if these things didn't sneak their way through the back door, we all wouldn't have been talking about this right now. There's also an archangel named Castiel that I was reading one time. And this was actually back in the days where I was a little bit over the top, and I took my journey a little bit too far, and I was talking to an angel, and I kind of learned that that's a no-no. You don't want to do that. If something's talking back to you and telling you information and guiding you, that's a bad putty tat. You could be misled by the serpent himself directly from the source, imposing as a guardian, a guide, or whatever you want to call it. So be very careful when you're talking back, having a conversation with something that's not in physical form. Because I was talking to this Castiel, who told me information about Saturn and Kronos, how they're the same. There's two Kronos out there, just so that you guys know. And then this angel tried to tell me that past lives are real and that I was associated with. But I kind of see how now that is true, because, I'm a Capricorn, and Capricorn, our home planet, whatever, is Saturn. Saturn just went retrograde, by the way, which I think it was a good thing. Like, I was actually pretty nervous that we have Mercury retrograde and Saturn retrograde at the same time. But what's interesting is things that I've battled or had been conflicted with, or people who give me a hard time daily, or issues that I've had on a daily normal basis, it was sort of like they're not even a thing anymore. It's like, oh, yeah, whatever. You know, it's like I'm more focused on, now I'm able to detail this house that I spent so much time rebuilding, if that makes sense. Like, now I'm ready to put up the drapes and select the furniture I want, where it was only like the last 5 years where I've been doing demolition and renovation and waiting for inspection clearances and city code clearances. So what I'm trying to say in this message is that be mindful that there is a serpent in all of us, and it is what makes us decide to do the bad things that we judge ourselves upon. The serpent is judgment. The serpent is of this Yahweh. Yahweh was the God of judgment, the God of it wasn't really deceiving people, but it was the God of the ultimate test. I'm gonna test you guys. I'm gonna just mess with your mind and see what you do, and I'm gonna let you get away with it because I'm judging you. I'm seeing how you handle it. I'm seeing what you do about it. I'm seeing how you convict yourself. It's like this serpent is so smart, very smart. But but you have to look at the reason why our Father would allow such thing to happen, and why such thing would manifest itself for almost 5,000 years, if that is the correct timeline. But you guys have a wonderful night, and we're all in one of the same. So before you start hearing, ooh, Lucifer, you have to think he's also a light bringer. Well, was created in the image of becoming or being a light bringer, and used his power against himself, and he destroyed himself. Or even if you Google search, how did Zeus die, there's your answer as to what happened to Lucifer. It's just a theory, it's a thought, and it could be the truth. It could be what is resonating with me from a divine source. Bye, everybody. Have a great night. There I am. Take care.